Hello, this is the fourth video in the series of videos we're recording to introduce SISEN. The purpose of this video is basically to introduce you to the general SISEN attack workflow. So we will not show you all the attacks because there's so many of them, but we'll show you how those attacks work and the workflow of them, and then we can look at some examples later on. So what I'm going to do first, if you open the GitHub repository, you'll find that there's a lot of different documentation. One of those documentations is about attacks. I think it's quite useful. It's important for you to read that. And also there is a detailed documentation which is in the learning materials in a document called Attack and Disruption Guide. This document all of the attacks that exist in the environment. So what we're going to do now, we're going to look at how those attacks work. So today, for this video, the objective is not simply to run the attack. The objective is to try to understand how those attacks work. So an attack should only be started after the relevant SISEN scenario is already running. There is no point running it when the scenario is not running. So I'm going to, again, like usually, go to SISEN, which is on desktop, and I'm going to set up the environment. And then after we set up the environment, I'm going to run the launch SISEN with the scenario smart building, or any scenario you want. Mode open node 4 nodes. If you can use something else, you can use, for example, WPA2 and -- capture pins. Once the scenario is running and the dashboard is running, we can go to the attack. So the dashboard will be running with normal traffic, with the baselines that you established before. Once we start seeing that the MQ telemetries are arriving, then we can move. At the moment, there's 2 of them are running. That's a third. And finally, that's the 4th. And all of them are running, and all of them now are reporting their data. So you can move on to the dashboard is running normally, and then we can start thinking about the attacks. So I'm going to open a new terminal, and I will run those attacks from another terminal because obviously the first terminal needs to be running. You do not need to activate the Python environment. You're already there, so it's already running. So what we're going to do now, first of all, we're going to look at the attacks. All the attacks are in a folder called attack. So I'm going to go to that folder. So Python 3 attacks. As we said, we run all the commands from the root directory, but you can run them as well from the field directory. And I'm going to run the Python script for those helpers, which is run _ attack py, and then -- list. That will list all the available attack activities inside the SISEN tool. And you can see that quite a lot. The output will show you different attacks for different scenarios. Also, they are categorized in different categories and different attack names, and whether the activity is helper based or manual. And what that means is whether that activity has a script that runs automatically, you don't need to do it, or whether manual means there's a documentation on GitHub that will allow you to follow that documentation to run that attack. And the manual attacks are at the moment only related to the wireless infrastructure, so you need to go on monitor mode and use them. But all the other attacks that are related to SISEN are happening using the SISEN helpers. So we can filter those attacks because there's quite a lot. So I'm going to run that same command again, but this time I'm going to filter them with the specific scenario. So I can say it's building, and that will give me only attacks related to building. Still, it's a lot of attacks, but it's a lot less than what we had before originally. And you can see that these are the manual ones. These are the ones that are helper based. And again, you can do the same for medical. And again, these are the helper based, and these are the manual one. And again, you can do the same for 6-low pan. And that will tell you the manual one and the category one. A lot of them are very similar. So for example, extreme integrity, it's there for 6-low pan, for medical, or for smart building. Now the other thing that you can do is to list your attacks by category. So I can run that same command, -- list, and then instead of using scenario, I'm going to use category. And for the categories, we have quite a few categories that we have identified that are important for us to look at. First category is authenticity. That will give us attacks that basically violates authentication, which means a device can be using a spoofed address and there's no authentication. Authentication in this case is violated, and it's basically sending as impersonating some other nodes. You can also use another category, which is integrity, which basically will violate integrity. So for example, integrity attacks are basically attacks that either gives really extreme values that are not realistic, or malformed, which basically the sensor will basically publish that I really don't know what this value is. So some things that don't make any sense. And again, the third category is replay. Replay attacks are basically either focusing on replaying the state, or basically they attack the message freshness. This message is not new. That patient could have their situation deteriorated, but now the node is, the wearable device is basically publishing repeated devices from earlier on when the patient was okay, because it's replayed. And you can also use availability. That will attack the availability of the node, like missing or dropping the client, or basically creating noise that will distract, that will disconnect these devices and so on, or it will publish noise, so the device will start publishing wrong data. You can also use confidentiality. Confidentiality are mainly related to the manual infrastructure activities for wireless observation, WEP capture, WPA2 handshake captures. We'll look at them later on in a separate video. And finally, actually not finally, there are two more. There is protocol, which are the ones that look specifically at activities that focus on communication paths or protocol behavior, basically. And finally, safety cases. These are categories that contain scenario-focused activity, where the safety consequences is the main heading. So instead of attacking all the different nodes or sensors, we're focusing on nodes that create safety hazard, safety implications. So for example, fire alarms, or gas leaks, or something, or a panic button, or a fall for a patient, and so on. Now, it's easy to run those attacks. So when you run the attack, you can use several different comments at the same time. So let me just clear this. There's too much information on it. And to run an attack, we simply just type Python 3 attacks, run attack, and then the category. For example, let's say you want to run integrity, or let's start with authenticity because we're starting with a simple example now. And then on the building, which because the building scenario is currently running, and we're going to use spoofed attack, and I'm going to open it here. Now, spoofed attack don't really show you much in terms of what's changing on your dashboard, simply because a spoofed device can still send normal data, so it doesn't show something that is extreme. And you can see gas detected, occupied, and you can see here it started showing actually critical. So this is a spoofed device that is sending wrong data. So we timed it to have to do that for several seconds and then stopped rather than continued for a long time. You can also, for example, run integrity. Since we have the building running, you will keep it running. And for example, we can run extreme. And again, if you look at the dashboard, you will find that things are becoming extreme. So for example, you have 52% humidity, which is very high. Or for example, high CO2 or smoke detected, and so on. And you will notice that once the attack stops, it goes back to the normal situation, to the normal baseline. There's also a few other options depending on the attacks that you can see. So for example, in some attacks you can specify how long, the duration, or the target. So for example, I can run the same command. Now I'm going to run availability, which is obviously about creating noise on scenario building. The availability attack is called noise, and I'm going to type count 5. Basically, that means repeat that specific attack 5 times. So that's 1, that's 2, that's noise burst, and you can see that the sensors start giving values all over the place. 5, and it stops. Or the duration. So for example, for duration, client dash drop, and you can see, for example, you can put it in the target room 101. I just have these saved. However, for this, for example, you will notice that you need sudo. Because you're attacking the Wi-Fi level, the Wi-Fi layer. And the target here just specified a specific namespace, which is room 101. And you can see that it disconnected for a while. We didn't, yes. So temporarily disconnected the zone for 10 seconds. We'll try it again. You can see it's down, and then it's up. Now, there's a lot of different scenarios with different values and different attacks that you can conduct. I will not be showing all of them because otherwise the video will be very long. However, this basically summarizes how the workflow of the attack is. So for listing all available attacks, you can filter them by categories, scenarios, attacks, by categories and scenarios. For the helper-based attacks, you can look at the each of those attack helper can have a specific option. For example, the attacks, the count. Some of them have count, duration, and options. Some of them are relevant for some scenarios, some are not, depending on which scenario it is. By listing and by the categories and the scenario, you will be able to identify which is relevant to which scenario. I'm going to stop this video here. The next video, we will go a little bit more in details about different examples of attacks from different places, from different scenarios. Thank you.